Hi, I'm Riccardo. Today's topic is application modernization for Microsoft workloads on AWS. I'm joined here today by Prasad. Hi, Prasad.
Hey Ricardo, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, Prasad, what does it mean, application modernization for Microsoft workloads on AWS?
So let's first understand what comprises of Microsoft workloads. Mainly the workloads that are run on Windows servers. And that can be your .NET applications or your SQL Server databases. So when you modernize these .NET applications and SQL Server databases on AWS, it's about moving them to the AWS first services or open source technologies on AWS.
Thank you very much. So, can you elaborate a little bit more on this division that that you just introduced?
Sure. So let's talk about .NET applications first, right? .NET was first introduced by Microsoft in 2002. And at that time, .NET framework, the version that it was able to be run only on Windows.
Okay.
So it was proprietary and it can run only on Windows. And we call them .NET framework.
Okay.
And there were multiple versions of it over the decade. So till 2012, there were multiple versions of .NET. In 2012, Microsoft thought that we should be now investing in a more open source, cross-platform version of .NET.
Okay.
So there was no new release after 2012. In 2016, a newer version of .NET came, which is .NET Core, and that is open source and cross-platform version. That means it can run on Linux. So now the latest versions of .NET that we have can run on Linux.
Okay, so sorry, you mean that the same application can run both on Linux operating system and on a Windows operating system, am I right?
Yes, if it is written in latest version of .NET, which is what .NET Core and after is.
Okay.
Current, the long-term support version is .NET 6 that we have.
Okay.
But if our application is written in .NET framework, which we call as legacy .NET, then it can run only on Windows.
Okay. And what are the advantages then of transitioning to this new version for a customer compared to being on an old version or better? What is the advantage in general of being able to run both on Windows and on Linux? So are there any possible cost advantages or?
So yeah, so when you transform your applications to run on Linux, you definitely are saving on costs, right? There is license reduction. You don't need to pay for Windows licensing servers anymore, right? So that's a huge advantage. Second is the performance benefits. .NET on Linux is almost 30% better performant than .NET on Windows. And then now, .NET can run also on ARM64.
Okay.
Now with ARM64, we have Graviton processors. And now Graviton processors are like, even more performant in terms of your x86, right? So those are the advantages that customer gets. So not only in terms of the cost, but also in terms of the performance.
Sure.
And then they can containerize them to Linux containers. And Linux containers are more performant than Windows containers. They can run it as serverless on AWS.
And what about licensing on the database side of things? I understand that there are licenses that today are associated to Microsoft for SQL Server. So I was wondering what is the solution there offered by AWS, or what is the strategy?
Strategy for that is that, like, when you have SQL Server, you're paying two licenses. One is the SQL Server license, and other is the operating system Windows licenses that you are running on top of. So now, one way is that we have seen few customers moving their SQL Server on Windows to SQL Server on Linux. That helps you save at least the operating system license.
Yes.
Starting from SQL Server 2017, the SQL Server can run on Linux. And from SQL Server 2019, the feature parity of the Windows and the Linux has reduced in terms of what SQL Server features are supported. So I've seen some customers doing that to save some costs. But most customers are actually modernizing their SQL Server databases to databases built for the cloud. That is our Amazon Aurora or DynamoDB, Redshift, and we do have tools to support that journey for our customers.
Okay, good, excellent. So, what is the typical journey then of a customer who is transitioning to these new solutions?
So I'll take an example of a customer, CoStar. So CoStar, they had a web application that actually, used to distribute high resolution images and videos. There are a customer who had in commercial property, so they used to have these images and videos, high resolution of the commercial properties. Now they started their journey to AWS in around 2011. I would say they are quite early adopters of AWS, like the cloud, when they migrated their storage to AWS because it made sense because they had storage. Now their application was a .NET framework application, ASP.NET web application that was running on Windows servers on-prem.
Okay.
They first lifted and shifted them onto Amazon EC2 Windows instances.
So sorry, lifted and shifted means moving as it was, right?
As it was.
Okay.
So they rehosted or migrated as is without making any code changes onto AWS on the Amazon EC2 Windows instances.
Sure.
That did help them with scalability in terms of they can add new instances when the load is high and they can remove instances when the load is low.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
good.
And I'm talking about this about before 2016 when there was no open source or cross-platform version of .NET. So the only way to run your .NET framework application was to run it on Windows.
Yeah.
In 2016, when the open source version of .NET came, which is .NET Core, and it was able to be run on Linux, CoStar started modernizing their code base from .NET Framework to .NET Core so that they can run it on Linux. Okay. Now, during porting and the whole process, they did containerize their code base to Linux containers.
Okay.
And then run it on AWS in a serverless fashion on Amazon ECS Fargate.
Okay.
And even used Fargate Spot.
Okay, which is an additional cost saving.
Exactly. And then they were able to save 90% of the cost by doing that. So it's not only the completely license elimination, because you are moving away from Windows servers and coming onto Linux, but also running it in a serverless fashion.
Yes.
Right? So because when the pandemic hit and the whole commercial property was down and they did not have to have these servers, so this serverless app running in a serverless container fashion helped them to reduce costs drastically.
Okay, so you mentioned that the gain came also from running this as a serverless. So maybe can you explain a little bit more about that? Serverless meaning that Fargate was supporting the serverless functionality, and what was specifically the benefit? Why Fargate? Why Amazon ECS?
The reason when the customer modernized their .NET framework code base to .NET Core, it can run on Linux. But how would it be running on Linux? So there were few parameters. The storage was already on AWS, so their application now how to run on AWS, and they were a fully AWS native customer, and that is why they chose Amazon ECS, so that they get a more better integration with other AWS services.
Okay.
And then their load was not that high. They did not have to have it running it continuously, like 24/7. It is a more commercial property. So depending upon who will access this, they need to provide those images and videos.
Okay.
And that is why Fargate task made more sense to run those containers as a serverless fashion.
Because basically with the serverless mode, and hence Fargate in this case, as a computing, you pay for what you use only, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that reduces your cost further. And the customer, went one step ahead and used Fargate Spot.
Excellent. Okay.
So
that was for specifically maybe for processes like batch processes, which didn't need always computing power 24/7.
Exactly. So in the scenarios where they did not need a full availability always, they tried and used Spot instances.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Good. Thank you very much.
Good.
And So Prasad, from a more general perspective, when a customer wants to start this journey, and the partners and AWS all together as a team, how do they approach it? So what are the phases, the stages? Do we as AWS provide any tools to actually make this journey easier?
Oh, yes, yes. So let's say, a customer is a Windows workload shop, and they have .NET applications and SQL Server databases. And if you have a portfolio of these applications, we do provide tools that can assess this portfolio and provide them the modernization recommendations.
Okay.
Okay, and then there are tools at the asset stage to assess each individual application database, and then there are tools that can help you to do the actual modernization so that you can reach the final state that you would like to be on AWS.
Okay, so we have three big groups, I understand.
Yes, discovery, assessment, and then the modernization.
Okay.
And we provide tools and assistance at each of these stages.
All right. Can you provide examples maybe about the discovery phase, about tools that we provide exactly to perform these functionalities?
Sure. So I would like to talk about two tools that we have. The first is AWS Migration Hub Strategy Recommendations.
Okay.
Now this tool, what exactly it helps you is it assesses your portfolio of applications, and based on your business requirements, it provides you with a roadmap for each of these applications that whether or not you should be doing a refactoring to, let's say, serverless or containers, replatforming to Windows containers, or simply rehosting them.
Okay.
Right? And it does it in an automated manner. It discovers the applications, and based on the business requirements that you have inputted to the tool, it provides you with these recommendations. And then we have other tool, AWS Modernization Calculator for Microsoft workloads.
Okay.
So now what we have heard from the customer is that using the pricing calculator, they are able to estimate what the workload would be. And it is easy for them when they are rehosting their applications. So let's say they are 100 Windows servers that they are moving to AWS. It is pretty easy for them to go to pricing calculator and go to Amazon EC2, choose the Windows and get the estimate. But if the customer is moving to, let's say, cloud first architectures, they might not be knowing about all the services like, Lambda, API gateway, or, like Cognito. So in those scenarios, AWS Modernization Calculator for Microsoft workloads helps you to understand what the modernized state architecture would look like on AWS and then provide you an estimate with it.
Okay, so it basically helps from two perspectives. On one side is a recommendation for a high-level architecture, infrastructure architecture, and on the other side it provides recommendations or an indication about the total cost of ownership.
Exactly, and that helps. See, modernization is a heavy lift for both customers and partners in terms of it is not as easy as just moving your workloads onto AWS. So there is a refactoring that is required, right? And to put your investment into that, you need to create a business case that you would be able to get a break even of the ROI within 2 years or 3 years, and that is what helps like Modernization Calculator be able to provide you that what the modernized state architecture would look like and how much it would cost you once you have moved into the target state.
Sure. Okay, and what about the next phases? So let's say that I am a customer and I have my workload or workloads running on Windows, and I want them I wanted to modernize them. So what are basically from this side after the discovery phase, what happens? What I have to do? What can I do?
So let's say you have a .NET Framework legacy application,
okay,
and as we know, most legacy applications are monoliths, right? So when you modernize them, there are two things that you are doing. First, you are modernizing your code base from .NET Framework to .NET 6 so that you can run it on Linux.
Okay.
Then you might want to split your monolith to microservices.
Yes.
And you can adopt your, like latest DevOps tooling and, all the good things that comes with microservices architecture. So we have separate tools for that. First, talk about let's porting to .NET 6, the latest version of .NET that we have. We have Porting Assistant for .NET, and we have AWS Toolkit for refactoring.
Okay.
Both the tools, Porting Assistant for .NET comes also as a standalone tool so that you can deploy it on your Windows machine and provide the source code to it, and it will be able to assess your legacy source code and provide the compatibility with the latest version of .NET, so that you're able to estimate the effort, how much it will be required to do the actual modernization project, or do the actual porting.
Oh, interesting. So it also makes an analysis of the code base. It assesses if this can be done and what would be basically the effort to do it.
Exactly. So it provides like the NuGet packages. It tells that what is the alternative NuGet package you have on the latest version of .NET. Okay, if this is the API call that your code base is doing in the legacy, what is that API call compatible or not compatible?
Okay.
If it is not compatible, what can be the alternatives?
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
It also showcases a dependency graph of all your projects, which helps you to actually visualize and take a decision about in which order you would be modernizing each of these multiple subparts of the project.
Okay.
And then .NET Toolkit for refactoring, it comes as a Visual Studio plugin.
Okay, so this is basically a tool that helps you refactor your code as a plugin. Am I right?
Yes. So it's a Visual Studio extension so that developers don't need to do back and forth between their favorite developer IDE that they have and the standalone tool.
Okay.
And they are able to look into the incompatibilities in a fashion that they are familiar with.
Okay.
It shows it in the error tab with a warning.
Okay, clear. What about the refactoring, which involves breaking down a larger application, usually conventionally called a monolith? What do we have?
We have a tool called AWS Microservice Extractor for .NET, and that tool helps you to refactor or split your monolith to microservices. It's an assistive tool. In the assessment phase, you can use this tool to visualize all the application components,
Okay.
group them together to see how each of these group will look like as a microservice. It also provides AI-based recommendations about how you should be splitting your monolith, or the heuristic based.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. And what about the last phase? So actually, when the work is done, what AWS offers to help with this transition?
So again, both these tools, AWS.NET Toolkit for refactoring, which is a Visual Studio extension, can be used to port to .NET 6. So once the assessment is complete and you have looked into all the incompatibilities, there is a way to just click on that port button, and when you click on that port button, it is able to port the code base to the latest version of .NET, and you can choose it, whether it is .NET 6 or .NET 7. Now, it's not a magic tool. It is going to do the changes as much as possible.
Of course, yes.
But then there will be a manual effort required on top of it.
Sure.
To make any incompatibilities that was not automatically done by the tool. So there will be a developer expertise required, but it takes away the manual tasks, a mundane task the developer has to do. Like changing your project files from the previous version to latest version, and those, like whatever can be automated is already automated.
It anyway helps with productivity from developers.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other tool, AWS Microservices Extractor. So once you have grouped those nodes during the assessment phase and you have made those, decisions that, like using the strangler fit pattern that we call, right?
Sure.
You keep extracting those microservices one by one. You will be able to extract that code base from your monolith code base using the Microservice Extractor for .NET in the project phase. And it's then going to split your code base into two. One, the main, and the other is a small microservice, and there is a connectivity in between which you can test. So continue.
Okay, leveraging, you mentioned the strangler fig pattern, which basically encapsulates what is new and then gradually diverts the APIs or the traffic depending on the context to the new components, right, one by one.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's domain-driven design that
Yes,
we have
sure,
generally,
sure.
right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And what about partners? So what tools, what programs, how do partners also address Windows and Microsoft in general on AWS?
So partners play a very pivotal role in modernizing Microsoft workloads of our customers, right? In fact, there are partners with specific designations that we have. One of the designation is Amazon EC2 for Microsoft Windows Service Delivery Partners, and we have around 300 partners worldwide with this designation that customers can choose from.
Yep.
And we have a more specialized competency, AWS Microsoft Workload Competency, and we have 76 partners worldwide.
Okay.
And these partners who have these designations are eligible for a specific funding program, which is Microsoft Modernization Program.
All right. Okay. Good.
And that provides funding to the partners so that they can do the assessment of their customer workloads and provide them with a business case and a SOW to modernize their Microsoft workloads in AWS.
Okay. Okay.
And then also during the project phase, there is a funding available to partners for this.
Okay. So there are basically two funding groups that address these two stages, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
One on the assessment side and other on the actual modernization project or implementation phase.
Okay, thank you, Prasad. And if I am a customer and I wanted to get in contact with partners that are expert in this domain, what can I do?
So yeah, you can browse to our AWS website in the partner page. You will be able to filter the partners who have these two designations that I talk about.
Okay.
And you'll be able to see the list of these partners, and then you'll be able to filter them by region, by specific expertise.
Okay.
And then, yeah, choose the right partner for your needs.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe that also by you are able to actually see the details of the partner and browse their offerings as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. You'll
Okay.
be able to browse their offering, and there'll be a contact partner page through which you'll be able to contact the partner directly.
Okay, thank you very much, Prasad, for joining me today, and thank you everyone for listening. If you want to know more about application modernization for Microsoft workloads on AWS, click on the links under the video. Thank you very much.